In today's episode of Pivot by Faith, we meet Courtney Andersen. Courtney is an entrepreneur, author, podcaster, and sober coach, selflessly supporting and empowering others who are battling addiction. She sends a message of empowerment to others that we are meant to thrive, not just survive. How does she do it? Well, just stay right there. And let's take the pivot journey right now on Pivot by Faith. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Pivot by Faith. I'm your host, Denise Nixon, and it is a pleasure and an honor and a blessing to have with us today Ms. Courtney Andersen. And Courtney has such a powerful story to share with us. It's going to motivate and inspire. So I just want to say welcome, Courtney.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Denise, for having me. I am so looking forward to this chat we're going to have today and connect with you.
Excellent. Excellent. I can't wait for people to hear your story. And myself, I want to hear more about your story. We've had a chance to chat for just a few minutes before starting this podcast. And I want to give everyone a chance to hear your story and what you have to share that is really going to make a powerful difference and an impact on people after hearing your story today. So, Courtney, if you would just share with us who you are and what you do.
Yes. Well, thank you again. So my name is Courtney, and I am a sober coach, a podcast host, and an author. So that's professionally what I do. I am also a mother, a wife, a lover of personal development, Bravo television, and of course, funny people. So that's a little, and I'm a Libra. So that's a little bit of my, my personal, of my overall me.
Excellent. And Courtney, you mentioned several things, and we're going to have to dive right in to what you've talked about. You're a sober coach, an author, and a podcaster. And I want to ask you to start off on your website, which is amazing. You have on your website, I was on the shame, guilt, hangover, anxiety-ridden roller coaster for a decade when it came to my addiction with alcohol. Then I learned that I deserved to feel love and be loved, that anything is possible in sobriety. Your life is worth it. Out of all the things on your website that were so powerful, that caught my eye, and I just lingered on that and was just reading. Tell us more about what motivates that quotation from your website.
Yeah, so that all came from, August 18th of 2012 was the first day of the rest of my life. You sometimes hear people talk about that when they get married. For me, my life really started again because people who live in active addiction and then live in sobriety, they get a 2-for-1 life. And mine started on August 18th. So what happened was I woke up that morning to a girlfriend standing over me telling me that I lost my rescue cat. And what she didn't know was that was the second time I lost my rescue cat, and that my boyfriend was very upset with me. And then she peaced out. So I had to then figure it out. How I lost my cat for the second time is because in the blackout I was in the night before, I opened up the screen door to go outside to smoke a cigarette, and I left it open. That's how I lost her a couple months prior. And then I had to deal with my boyfriend. Him and I were living at the time, and he came down and gave me a recap of the night before, how I threatened his life, and that I was a complete mess. And I promised him that I wasn't going to drink as much as I said I was going to, because at this point, him and I had been together for 1.5 years, and he had witnessed some of my complete meltdowns in my addiction, in blackouts, So he said, you can continue to go down this path. If you want to drink, you can drink. He's like, but I'm not going to stick around for this. So for 3 days, my cat was missing, and I made a pact to the universe. And I said, if I find Fiona, I will give this sober life a go. And I found her 3 days later. And now that then boyfriend is my husband. Fiona is still with us, and we have a son who's a year and a half. So
congratulations. That's
thank
beautiful.
you. Thank you. So, but what brought me up to that point too, because a lot of people just, assume that was, I just stopped drinking one day. And that was not the case. My drinking started from when I was 19 years old until I was 29, about 6 weeks shy of being 30. However, at 25, I knew intuitively that there was going to be a day that I was going to have to give up alcohol. I didn't know when, I didn't know how, but I knew at 25, I'm like, this does not work with me anymore. I have woken up in a hospital. I had woken up in jail. I had woken up many of nights, not remembering what happened. I had woken up many of nights sleeping with a person, not knowing his name, but I could tell you what bar I met him at, just putting myself in continuous dangerous situations, So it really was from 25 to 29. I tried the moderation game, and I tried fitting alcohol into my life by putting rules on my drinking of like, well, I'm only going to have wine. I'm only going to drink beer. I cannot drink shots. I cannot drink hard liquor, none of that. Make sure that I eat, because God knows the problem is me not eating, which it's exhausting. So by the time I quit drinking, I felt like a very, 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 very tired 90-year-old. I felt very tired in a 29-year-old's body. And that last hangover, the shame and guilt was so crippling. It was like the 10 years of the things I had done, even though I felt them from years prior in that moment, but it's like it all caught up to me at once, where I was just like, I had to surrender to the fact that this no longer worked for me. And this was not the life I was supposed to be living moving forward. It definitely was the life I lived to get me to the point I am today. And too, in that active addiction, there were times that I didn't want to live. And for many people, addiction is a matter of life and death. So if you can get out of it in the sense of moving forward and living in sober life and get help, you see that your life is worth living, and that there is a fight you have to put in to get to that point.
Yeah. Courtney, that's so powerful. I'm still thinking about some of the comments that you've made. What was it about your struggle during the challenges that you were experiencing that you've just shared? What was the moment that you said, okay, that's it? And I know that you mentioned a date that was relevant for you, but what was it that just made you say, I'm going to do this?
It honestly was so when I had lost Fiona for the second time in those 3 dates, and this is where, I love the title of your podcast. And like we talked about to faith. Okay. And in that day, when I found her, and I had looked where she was hiding, I looked. So I don't know how I did not find her where she was hiding, but it was outside. And she comes out underneath this deck, and this poor little cat has like cobwebs in her face. I remember she had a leaf behind her ear, and she came out, and I dropped to my knees, and this all happened where then she crawled up to me, and everything around me got super slow. I couldn't hear the traffic on the road. I couldn't even hear like the leaves in the tree that was above me. And I had a awakening in that moment where I was like, okay, I said it out loud in a 3-day hangover. Like, if I find Fiona, I'm going to give up alcohol. And then that spiritual moment happened of that. I believed, even though at that time, the word God was very hard for me. I didn't have a sense of connection into something bigger than myself. So, but in that moment, God, the universe, whoever you believe in, was showing me that it was time. and that it was time for me to move forward without alcohol.
And from that point, did you know a plan of action, or did you just take it just from there, from that day forward, just day by day?
Day by day. I didn't have a plan. And, and then eventually when you get into the process of recovery and go into programs like the 12 steps, you learn about one day at a time. And because somebody could really get tripped up and like, okay, I need to have this plan. I need to have this all laid out. And you have it all laid out and you have a runway for a year of like how I'm going to do this sober living. But then when you start living each day at one day at a time, someday one day at a time turns into like 1 minute of a time of not drinking because your thoughts are so into it and it's just so habitual of the life that you used to live. So I think when it comes sometimes to plans in recovery, you kind of got to throw them out the window, especially in those early days. You just have to wake up each day, say, I'm thankful for another day sober, and continue on. And continue on and continue on. So I didn't have a plan. I did not have a plan other than not to drink each day.
Wow. And you mentioned about your faith and that you knew that there was someone, something, some power, God, that was guiding you in this. How has your faith journey changed from that moment to now?
So huge. My mom was always, when we were younger, she took us to church. My mom was always spiritual. She was connected to God. And then somewhere along the way, I had lost that connection, through life, through my own addiction, through of what I thought that life was throwing at me. So when I got sober, and when you get sober, you then start having a lot more clarity. And in my clarity, and when time and healing, that I could connect to something greater than me. So, and believe in a faith of trusting a process. And in recovery and sobriety, you have to trust the process. I say that a lot to people I work with, like, trust the process, trust the process. And I had to believe, again, going back to that moment with my cat, like there is something bigger than me guiding me to continue to not drink each day. So I'm comfortable now using the word God and actually believing in God. But I refer it more into the universe. And it's a complete 180 of that. I do believe in something greater and more than what we have currently, right? Something greater than us.
And it sounds like each day brings something new and different for you that may, in fact, contribute to your relationship that you have with God. Especially when you talked about the fact that you're did you call it a sober coach? Please tell us about your career or your calling as a sober coach.
Yeah. So I got in the health coaching world through an MLM back when in 2015. I had actually, that last night of drinking, I had finished my career in I was a bartender and I was transitioning into the medical field full time. So when I woke up in my sobriety, I was like, I don't want to do this in the medical field. Like I thought it was a really great idea. And then I was in it for a couple of years and was like, this is not what I want to do, because my future my future self thought, what am I going to do when we have kids? Like, I'm not just going to work to pay for them to be in daycare. Wow. So then I was introduced into the health coaching space, and I was a health coach for a couple of years. Okay. And since I was very vocal about my journey on social media, 30 days in, I had got people who always reached out to me about their sobriety. So eventually came the point where I then became a sober life coach. I wanted to wait. It was till about 6 years in, because I wanted to make sure, not saying that I don't think people are forever healed, but I needed to work on myself before I was able to take on other people's baggage, other people's backpacks is what I kind of like to call it. So I wanted to make sure that I was secure in my own sobriety and really did the work on me. before offering that up. So it just kept coming. It always just kept showing up of people asking me and looking for ways to work with me and all of that. So it was a slow evolution. In about 2016, I went back to AA. I tried it in the beginning, but it was something that I didn't connect with because I had severe anxiety, and two, people were using God, the word God, and it was too much for me at the time. So I went back, and in the summer of 2016, I participated with the program. And in that was where Sober Vibes was created, because I was listening to women and I'm like, there's something more that's needed here. And I needed something more empowerment and more support. And like, okay, I understand that should be doing this, but how, I want to be able to go out and sit in a restaurant and not be bothered by alcohol, because alcohol is everywhere in our society. Wherever you live, majority of places around the world, alcohol is heavily influenced. Mm-hmm. So, because I didn't just get sober just to sit at home. I don't want to live that way. So I needed more tools and tips to help support myself and others in their journeys of how they were going to be able to be comfortable, to be able to be comfortable in environments like that.
Right.
So that is really how I felt like I was called upon and continued of putting faith in that process.
Yeah. And you talked about having anxiety mm-hmm. at hearing the word God. Mm-hmm. How are you now with that element of your experiences?
Great. And I'm very comfortable with it because I understand it, even though, again, my God is the universe, and, I find my church in nature, but I understand, which I can respect now that I did not before, of people's beliefs, right? That's what they believe in. That is what holds them. That's kind of what anchors them down. And if going to church is that, more power to you. I am a person who do what makes you feel the best and brings you joy, as long as it's not hurting people.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So as a sober coach, you help others mm-hmm. Discover what you have discovered.
Yes, through my years, through, participating in the program, through my years of therapy, I have dug really, really deep into personal development, hired my own coaches throughout my process. I have created my own programs to kind of all of that in one. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people that I work with, it's in the very beginning. And a lot of people, it's more for accountability to and support, plus with the holistic wellness behind it. Because a lot of people do not have support in that way, mm-hmm. where it's someone who, because I do lightly call people out on their BS. But a lot of people are enabled, and it doesn't, people who the enablers are not bad people. They just don't know any better, or just maybe think that it's not as big of a deal as it is for that person. But when I got sober, I white knuckled it for 2 years. So I didn't have any type of support around. And so when I stepped into this role of a sober coach, I said, you know what? People need that support, and to talk to somebody who does get it, because I couldn't talk to my husband. Mm-hmm. He didn't understand what it was like to get the itch around 5 o'clock on a Friday, where I just wanted to completely drink myself until a blackout. Like, he didn't get it because he didn't have that relationship. So a lot of my coaching really comes with a lot of accountability, empathy, and support.
Mm-hmm. You're saying a lot of things that people need to hear, because sometimes we can paint a picture of things, whether it's our faith or our journey, as picture perfect, and that there mm-hmm. are no stumbles, there are no mistakes. But, meeting people where they are mm-hmm. is what it sounds like you do.
Yes.
And being a true person of faith that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed mm-hmm. to meet people where they are too. So when you talked about your faith and mm-hmm. and spirituality and everything, I see many similarities there, where you may not consider yourself someone who, like you mentioned, goes to church every Sunday or something like that. I see so many similarities. I hear you saying that you're meeting people at their lowest, and that's what we want from God, and that's what he gives us. He meets us where we are, whether we're going to church every Sunday or we haven't been in 10 years. He still loves us. And I'm hearing you say that when you work with your clients, you meet them where they are. And you also said that you don't play around. You don't let them give you excuses.
I mean, but that some people just need some tough love. But that is the thing, because this is what's hard about the recovery and sobriety path. It's not a one size fits all program. And that is what we have been offered for a very long time, that it's like, these are the only ways. This is how you do it. Well, if you don't connect with that way, then how else are you supposed to do it? What's great about this time right now, of the age we're living at, is that, especially for this topic, there's so much support and help now of specific for moms, for dads. I mean, there's a whole nonprofit just for people who are in the service restaurant industry. So it's expanding, and it's great because at least it's an avenue of help and support. So I have met people 90 days out of rehab. I have worked with people who have just wanted support through a time that they had vacations planned, because the vacations always led them to a relapse. So my programs we're not like, okay, day one, we're going to do this. Week two, we're going to do this. It's really like, no, it's tailored to that person and what is going on in their life and their needs.
Okay. And so you would work with people if they're also in a program that's helping them. Okay, that sounds wonderful. So you could be a supplemental resource, or you can be someone to help them through the process of discovering what resources they may need.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because all of it is tools, right? So it's just like, I work with a lot of women too, who are going to therapy and use me. And, because not all therapists know what it's like to have, they study it. Yes, they've studied addiction, but they don't know what it's like living in it. Because there's a huge difference too of lived experience, of people who get it. Like, okay, I totally understand you're having anxiety right now on a Friday night at going to dinner with your husband, sitting there, because I did too. Wow. There's a huge adjustment to when you get sober. You're like a newborn baby in an adult body, having to learn to relive again.
Wow. It's an amazing connection when you encounter someone who has the same lived experiences that you have. Sometimes we can sympathize and empathize and that kind of thing, but someone who has walked in those shoes, it really has a unique connection. So I certainly hear what you're saying. And so I know that in addition to being a sober coach and the other titles that you mentioned that you do, you also have written a book. You are an author. Tell us about the book.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm actually currently in the final stage of the rewrite edit. So I was doing that before you and I talked. So yes, my book is coming out August 15th of 2023, and it's called Sober Vibes, a guide to living your first 3 months without alcohol. So it's really getting you in those first 90 days. And it's a little bit of a memoir, but it's also there's spaces in the book where I give you exercises to journal out, coach tips. So it's really me and my coaching style and guiding you through those first 90 days. Never, ever, ever. I always had this dream of writing a book since I was 7. I always wanted to be a published author. And then the fact that it's come true, and the fact that this came, in my first year of motherhood, it's amazing. And I'm so happy to have this book come out into the world to give people another resource and avenue of starting and what to expect, because that's not something in tools that they can actually read and then be like, okay, she told me to do this. I'm going to go out, I can socialize, and let me apply what she's talking about in this, because people still want to socialize, and I don't blame them. Just because, again, you stop drinking alcohol, it does not mean that the fun is over.
Yeah, it's still, they can still live, just different
Yes.
behaviors that will be
Yes.
characteristic of fun that
Mhm.
you help them discover, is what it sounds like.
Yes.
That's wonderful. Well, congratulations in
Thank you.
advance on your book that's coming up.
Thank you.
And before we wrap up, I want to make sure that the listeners and viewers know how they can contact you or find out more about what you do. And also, please share the podcast as well that you do.
Yep. So my podcast is called Sober Vibes, and you can find that on iTunes, Spotify. You can find that on all the platforms. And we have right now, there's 124 episodes so far. So there's a lot. There's a lot. And inside that, I do a solo episode, a guest episode, and then my sister and I have a show within a show, because my sister also suffered from addiction issues and is in recovery. So it's a family sister banter. So we also use a lot of humor. So
Excellent.
it works with people. They enjoy it. And Kimmy and I enjoy doing the show together. So you can, like I said, you can find that on all the apps. My website is courtneyrecovered.com. I hang out on Instagram at Sober Vibes. And, on my website, you can, if you're looking for a sober coach, you can apply to work for me, or just reach out to me and we can have a talk. So, and I got tons of free resources. I have a 30-day sober, not boring calendar. I just came out with a mocktail guide, and also to a morning and nighttime routine book, because it's very, very important for people who enter in sobriety to start structuring their days.
Yes, excellent. And for those of you who are listening to this, please know that all of this will be in the show notes, as well as on my website as well. So you'll have a place to be able to contact Courtney or learn more about what she does. And I tell you, what you do, Courtney, is a blessing. You are reaching out to so many people and helping them realize that there is a better way, that there's another way. And we all deserve to live in the fullness of joy and the happiness that God has created us to be here and to live abundantly. And you're helping people do that. And so thank you for all that you do. And what words of encouragement or inspiration, if any, would you like to leave with all of us as we wrap up this episode?
Well, thank you for all of that. I appreciate it. It just, that, because I get emotional about this. I get asked this a lot, and I get emotional every time, because I can put myself back of how hopeless one can feel in addiction, and how you can just be like, I'm not worth being here, and it's very easy to get into that. But I want somebody, if you're struggling out there right now, to listen that you are worth it, and to keep fighting. And even if you've started over at day 1 25 times, keep starting over, because eventually it's just all going to click, and you will move forward in the sober life and start feeling better, and the gifts of sobriety keep coming.
Thank you so much, Courtney. I know that those words are encouraging someone out there, and hopefully people will share this with others as well that will need to hear it, because this is something that people can use and that people need. So thank you, Courtney, for taking the time out, for spending some time and hanging out with me on Pivot by Faith. Thank you for tuning in to the Pivot by Faith podcast. Remember, if you or someone you know is in need of resources, please reach out to your local healthcare provider, 911 for emergencies, and 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Please know how much your prayers and support for this podcast are appreciated. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to leave a review and let me know what you enjoyed and what touched your spirit today. Be sure to visit my website at denisenixon.com to learn more about the podcast guests and to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and special video clips that you'll find when you subscribe to the Pivot by Faith YouTube channel. And to all of my fellow entrepreneurs out there, remember, you've got this because God has got you. Peace, grace, and blessings to all. Keep praising God Almighty in the name of Jesus. And let's connect again with the next episode of Pivot by Faith. Take care.